All right, so we'll get started. We're going to work on, from the beginning, I just want to tell you, we're going to work on a jiu-jitsu based self-defense model. So what I want you guys to know is that everything that we're going to do, you already do. We're just going to tweak it a little bit. That's all it is. It's just a matter of just kind of making some adjustments, tweaking some things so that it's more applicable to that environment. All right, so the environment could be anything. It could be, you know, people joke around about like the street versus sport is the argument. And when in reality, it's more like a parking garage, a kitchen, you know, or an office, you know, those are the places that you need to learn how to be safe and learn how to take care of yourself. And also how your jiu-jitsu applies in that environment. And so that's what we're going to work on. So we want to make it so that what you do every day in the gym here easily transfers over. Makes sense? So we don't want to make it so that you have to think, okay, well, wait, this is where I do my street stuff, or this is where I do my, you know what I mean? Like we don't want it to be like LARPing where you have to, pretend something. It's just what you do applies all the way across the board. So there shouldn't be any issues. All right. Makes sense? Everybody trains already, correct? Everybody pretty much trains. All right, cool. So here's what we'll do. Let's do this. So we want to talk about, for our purposes, we're going to start from the feet. We're going to start with verbal strategies, and we're going to move our way into where we end up on the ground and have to fight our way back up. Okay, so kind of like the natural progression of a fight. So starting on our feet, starting with a verbal contact with somebody, how to handle that, all the way through to if I get knocked to the ground, how do I get up safely, or how do I deal with not being able to get up safely? And you're going to see it's something that you do already. It's something that we work on all the time. It's actually pretty fun. So in my home gym, we call it Jiu-Jitsu versus the world, which is quite easy. I don't know if you guys have ever been in any kind of encounters since you started training with people outside of the gym. But invariably, the stories I always hear from people is that it was much easier than they thought it would be, because it is. You know, Jiu-Jitsu versus the world is like UFC 1. It's so easy. Like seriously, man, it's like, it is not much has changed. It's still 1993 when it's Jiu-Jitsu versus the world. So Jiu-Jitsu versus Jiu-Jitsu is a lot more fun. That's a chess match, you know, and we play that every day in the gym. So all you have to do for the street stuff is just scale it back a little bit, maybe make a few tweaks, and you're good to go. Make sense? All right. So a lot of the material I'm going to share with you guys comes from some guys that I've been working with for a long time. So I've been working with some guys, and it's called the ShivWorks Collective. There's 6 of us. We started in the late 90s doing this stuff. There's Craig Douglas, William April, Chris Fry, Larry Lindemann, and Cecil Birch. 3 of us are black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. 2 of us are brown belts. One's a psychologist. So there's a good mix of us in this group, and we've been feeding off of each other and holding each other accountable on this stuff for a long time. Also, we've been teaching this stuff for a long time, so in a variety of capacities. So I say all that not to say like, hey, I'm awesome, but to say like, we've had a chance to see a lot of different things. And so what I try to present now is the evolved version of that, with the scaled down version of that. You know, where we started was this very broad thing where we tried to cover a whole bunch of bases, and then over time we realized that we could cover all those bases with a very narrow slice. So does that make sense? It makes it easier too, you know? So if you don't have to think about, well, what do I do if it's an arm drag and he's wearing a gi, or if it's arm drag he's wearing a tank top, or if it's arm drag he's wearing no shirt, you know, simplifies things, correct? So one thing to rule them all, right? So, all right, so let's do this. So if you guys have ever done managing unknown contacts work with me at any of the camps or anything like that, this will be review. So let's start with that. So let's start with how we address somebody. So there's a couple things we have to look at. So managing unknown contacts is a acronym that comes from Craig Douglas, and I teach with his permission this material. Basically, what it stands for, it's MUC. So it's managing an unknown contact. An unknown contact is anybody that you just don't know, okay? Or we've kind of modified that definition over the years to include someone that you don't know at this time or don't recognize. And you guys understand what I mean by that, right? So if somebody's under the influence, so like this could be my brother, but right now he's drunk out of his mind and I don't know who this is. You know, this version of him is something I've never seen before. So this could be an uncle, something like that. So in this context, this is now an unknown because nothing's working. he's not responding as his normal self or her normal self. So this is how we want to learn how to deal with it. We want to learn how to first and foremost avoid escalating this problem. We want to, if we could at all, we would avoid the entire problem. You're going to win 100% of the fights you're not in, right? So if I could completely avoid it, I would. If I can't, then I want to figure out how to de-escalate. I want to figure out how to get this person to just take it down a notch. Maybe we can just back it off. You guys a lot of you guys are probably too young to remember in the 80s, the Cold War stuff. Matt will remember because he was 40 at that time. But in the 80s, there was a lot of you would have these issues where, the Berlin Wall, there was a shooting, or there was a shooting on the DMZ in Korea. And so it would instantly escalate. And it's like, man, how do we back off from the brink of nuclear mutual destruction? And in a fight, you guys have all discovered, how many have ever rolled hard, 4, 5, 6, 7 rounds, and then the next morning you wake up and you're like, whoa, man, that was pretty good. And you're in the bathroom or whatever, you're like, when I had hair, trying to brush your hair, and you're like, man, I got a lot of bruises, where'd that come from? So even though you might have dominated, or you might have had a good night, might have been your best night ever, you still took damage. And so in the street or in a self-defense situation, the damage could be a lot greater. Okay, so we look at it as the stakes are higher. So, your odds of winning are good because you guys all train, but the stakes, either way, are not so good. So you're going to take damage. Even when you're just here playing and having fun, you take damage. So you can imagine dealing with 1 or 2 opponents, or you're dealing with a family member where you're not escalating at the pace they're escalating at, and you're trying to be cool, and they're cranking on you already. You're going to take a lot of damage. So again, we come back to, if I can de-escalate this, get it to just chill and not have a physical confrontation, that's my best hope. Okay? All right, so we'll talk about deterrence as well. So when we talk about managing unknown contacts, let's get into the verbal component. I don't want to insult them. All right, so the one example of insulting somebody would be what? What would be an example? If you're a motherfucker. Exactly. So getting into a back and forth with them, right? Don't get into a back and forth. You got to have a script. So just have a loop. It's so simple. Just have a loop in your head, and I look at it as jiu-jitsu, right? When we're rolling, are we thinking about the arm that I have hold of right now, or am I thinking about something else? I'm thinking about something else, right? Like if I dive underneath an exposed elbow and I pull that exposed elbow and I catch the far side leg, I'm not thinking about this. I'm thinking about where I'm going from here, 3 moves down, right? So it's the same thing. If I'm engaging this person, I don't want to get into a back and forth with them. First, they might be better at it. Second, it could be insulting to them. And it might also just feed into what they want to get started. So if I could just cut it off. So one of the simplest things we can start with is just the ability to say to somebody no, or no thank you, and just keep moving. Make sense? All right, so let's start with that. I know it's going to feel silly, and we're not going to get in, again, back to LARPing. We're not going to LARP. We're not going to play. You don't have to be a thespian to do this stuff. All you need to do is, so if Kane is standing, and I walk to Kane, and I'm just like, hey man, what is SPG? He can simply just say, no thank you, and keep walking. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? It's not insulting, right? It doesn't antagonize me. It doesn't he doesn't posture up. He can just put his hand like this. Let's talk about the hands real quick. So what's the difference in hand posture as we get into this? What's the difference in this, and this? Yeah, one palm's up, one palm down. No, what is it? What's the differences?
Are you looking for maybe the inviting or almost like the nonverbal?
Right. This is knife hand, right? So you do this to somebody, that's a confrontation, all right? That's yelling at somebody. That's setting them up, that's letting them know what's up. This is telling somebody to stop, all right? But it's not confrontational. My elbows are in, my hands are up like this, and I'm just kind of but it's kind of halfway in between. All right, so it's a subtle thing, but it's important from a body language perspective, which is I want to just let them know, hey man, stop right there. I'm not full on directional yet, but can you just hold up right there? Can you stop right there? No, thank you, that kind of stuff. If I do this, that's submissive, and I don't want to be submissive. Yeah, exactly. No, thank you. Right? It's not the same. Doesn't resonate the same. Correct? So I want to be direct, non-confrontational, and about my business. Make sense? All right, so here's what we'll do. So everybody's going to stand. We'll have one person. I want you to just approach them, just ask them a simple question or something. You don't have to go too far in. You're not trying out for Broadway. We're not trying to get on stage here, but I want to just get a little interaction going. I want you to just approach someone and just have them just practice just going no or no thank you and keep moving. Don't stop. Don't get caught up in a conversation. And most of all, don't be confrontational. Make sense? Yes, sir. Eye contact, yeah, direct eye contact, and then look away. So that's important, that's a good point. Dog psychology, right? We're not that far removed from our animals. So what happens when you walk into a room with an alpha dog? Does he stare you down, or does he look at you and look away? He stares you down for a minute, but then he'll look away.
Because he isn't in fear of you.
Yeah, he doesn't scare, he's not afraid of you. So like if you're ever around like canines, and those kind of dogs, it's interesting to see a bunch of canines in a room together, like trained like military or police dogs. It's interesting to see a bunch of them together because that's a whole bunch of alphas in one little room, But you'll see the same behavior. They'll like make eye contact and then look away because that sends a message. Like, yeah, I see you, but not worried, So you want to make eye contact with them, but not too long because then it becomes like, hey, dude, are you eye checking me? Which is like, but you want to make eye contact long enough to let them know, like, yeah, I see you. I know you're there. I'm about my business. I got something else to do. Not time for this. Make sense? All right. And we can get further into that too, if you guys want to. All right. So let's do that. Partner up. We're going to work on that. Ready? 1, 2. Let's go. If we were working on this, so what happens if I say no, thank you, and they continue? Or I say no and they keep going? What can I do? Cross, right? No, not yet. That's coming. Not yet, though. No, so I want to avoid damage. I want to avoid violence begets violence, right? So that's an important thing to remember. Particularly if you ever encounter somebody who begins to say things like that, that's a danger sign, right? That's somebody who's been inside. So you don't want. That's somebody who's been in prison. Violence begets violence. So if somebody says violence begets violence, that means whatever you've said to them has sparked a violent response from them. Okay. That's usually like a we're going to go type thing, So it's similar to if a guy's like lace up. If a guy says lace up, that means tie your shoes, bro. We're going to get it on. So it's one of those things you want to just be aware of, little things like that. You don't have to be completely down with every little, prison slang term, but there are things like that you should keep in mind. All right. So I don't want to do anything that's going to spark violence. At the same time, I'm not afraid if it does happen, right? We all train jiu-jitsu. We're more badass than 90% of the people walking around out there. So you'll be all right. But why go there if you don't have to? Okay. So here's the next thing. So if they don't stop, I want to give them a simple direction. Can you hold up right there? All right. So it's up to you. I like to say, can you hold up right there? Or can you stop right there? I give them that option, right? I like to ask before I tell. Some people jump right to tell. Some people will just stop right there. All right? It's just that simple. Okay? So we're going to work on that now. So I want you to just simply say, the person's going to continue to encroach on you. I want you to just tell them, like, hey, can you stop right there? Now, what happens? My hands move more here. All right? So initially I'm like, hey, man, but now my hands move here. Now it's more knife hand. Now it's more like, can you stop right there? My hands are like, yeah, thumb down. So, but I want to give them like a direction now. Now it's like they're stepping it up. People don't, and I talk about this in the women's self-defense side more, but people who don't respect no at any level are dangerous. They're extremely dangerous. All right. So somebody who doesn't respect a simple request that would be socially acceptable, like, hey, can you stop right there? Like a normal person would just stop, like, oh, sorry. Person doesn't stop, something's not right. They have intentions, and I don't like them. I don't like those intentions at all. So somebody who won't take no for an answer won't take a no for an answer when, and I talk about this more, like I said, in the women's self-defense, but they won't take no for an answer when you tell them, no, I'm okay, I don't need any help carrying my groceries in. I'm okay, I don't want to go out with you again. No, I don't want to kiss you. No, I don't want you to touch me. All those things. When they don't respect no, that's that cascade that leads to bad things. So that's a warning sign. All right. So when we're talking to somebody on the street and I say, hey man, can you hold up right there? And they don't, or I say, no, thank you. And they don't listen, my radar goes way up. You know, my sense of danger goes way up because of all those things. Because what's underlying that is no means nothing to me. Make sense? All right. So next step, right, is we're just going to tell them, hey, can you stop right there? Or stop right there. Now, we'll talk about it in the next segment where we start to like drop F-bombs and stuff. But for right now, yes, freedom, right? I can say what I want. But in the beginning, right now, I don't use profanity. If you do use profanity like it's your daily language, then that's cool. If you don't start now. It's going to sound contrived and they're going to see right through it. So it's particularly now when there's still an opportunity to de-escalate, I'm going to stay away from anything that's going to be kind of evoke a bad response. Make sense? All right, so let's do that now. Can you stop right there? All right, ready? 1, 2. Next piece, real quick, is I've asked them, you know, I've told them, so I said, no, thank you. I've asked them to stop right there. Now I'm going to tell them. So Amanda brought up a good question, which is, do I want to, stay eyes on with them once I've reached this point, or do I want to keep moving? It's going to depend, and I hate that answer because that's a lame answer, you know. But it's going to be situational. So if I'm on a bus or a train or something like that where I can't get out of there, then yeah, I got to stay put, you know. Or if I'm in, say, you know, I had a friend that recently got in a confrontation in a line, you know, waiting to go with the what are those things called, the metal detectors for a concert to get in, and got into a little bit of a confrontation there. And he's like, where am I supposed to go? You know, there's people everywhere. So one of those things. But if you can maintain some sort of like visual on them while walking away, that's great. You know, I want to kind of look over, check, and then keep moving and get out of there. If they start following you, that's it. Turn around, face them. It's inevitable. This is going to be an easy day for you because you train, I promise. But it's still going to be unfortunate. You know, you're going to have to get into it with somebody. So, but that's on them, you know. So now the next step is we want to add in the command phase of this, which is I'm going to tell them to stop. So real quick, profanity. I dig it. You know, I like profanity. It's cool, you know, but not everybody does. So if you don't use profanity on a regular basis, don't start now. That's cool, man. Don't worry about it. It's better to be authentic because they're going to read that, you know, especially somebody who's seasoned. You have to think about it this way. Most people, most criminals, particularly what they call career criminals, they committed their first felony that they got caught for. So that's a distinction that's important by the time they were 11. So before they were a teenager, they'd already been in trouble for what would be considered a felony. So felonies are serious bodily injury, that kind of thing. Like they tried to hurt somebody bad. So, or they did something forcible. So this is probably a pretty good predator at this point. If this is somebody you don't know. Now, if this is somebody you know, that's a different thing, right? And they're acting in a way that's unknown to you. Okay, it's a different thing. We'll get into how to handle that too. But we're talking right now about just kind of like a street contact type thing. So they're good at this. They're good at reading you. They're good at seeing you. They're good at picking. All right. So you want to make sure they decide to pick somebody else. All right. I don't want them to pick me. It's just how it works. You know, the lion that sits up there and watches the gazelles run by and is like, I'm going to wait for a water buffalo. It's a better fight. You know, that lion doesn't live long, right? You know, so, and doesn't pass down his genes, you know. So what you're dealing with typically in career criminals are people that are raised around criminals, grew up around criminals, have already been to jail or to prison. So they've been to their finishing school. And so they're pretty good at it. So for better or for worse, that's just what we're dealing with. So we have to understand that. Okay. So, and to a lesser degree, get into this for a little bit. So to a lesser degree, when we're dealing with family members, people in the office, people that we work with, people that we maybe associate with who are predators or predatory, they're good at it, right? They've been doing it a long time. Okay, so I've never encountered a sexual predator who got caught on this first time. It's usually dozens and dozens, and then he gets caught. Right? He messes up in some way. So that's what we're looking at someone who's practiced. Okay? So when you address them, you need to be authentic. They're going to read it right away. They're going to read like, I'm not afraid. I'm not faking. I'm telling you to stay away from me. All right. So I said all that to say, you can tell them back the fuck up if that's what you would normally say. But if you don't drop F-bombs on a regular basis, don't do it now because they're going to see right through it. Make sense? And that's more dangerous than if you were to just say to them, you better back up. And you mean it. And you've got hours and hours of mat time behind you, right? That says, if you don't back up, I'm going to break your knee, right? So they're going to see that and they're going to feel it more than if you're like, back the fuck up, man, you know? And then they're going to be like, all right, bro, you know? They're going to be like, yeah, okay, right? So just be yourself, talk the way you normally would, but with, you know, authenticity, and let them know. Like, don't threaten them. Don't call them names. There's a difference between back the fuck up and back up, motherfucker, like Destiny pointed out. You know, don't be insulting. Don't engage. Just tell them, like, back up, dude. You know, back the fuck up. And that's it. All right? And then be prepared. And we're going to get into that in a second. All right? You're going to do, because then it's easy. You're going to do what you do every day here and just wreck them, you know? Yes, sir.
So if, like, hey, stop, hey, I asked you to back up, we went from 0 to a 1. We going for a 2 or are we going all the way to 10?
So, yeah, I'm going to go right to 10.
Okay.
Because, yeah, again, because that underlying disregard for no causes me to, like, be very alarmed. You know, somebody who just, if I've asked you to stop, and then I've asked you again to stop, that's twice that you've said no means nothing to me. That's scary. You know, that's somebody who's a predator, who's used to doing what he wants. That's somebody you got to deal with. So, make sense? That's a good question. So, you guys ready? All right, so let's work on that now. So I want you to go through it. So ask them to stop and then tell them to back the fuck up. All right, ready? 1, 2, let's go.